If I asked you which foods you miss most, chances are rice, bread, or potatoes would top the list. Most people with diabetes or prediabetes believe these are off limits forever, but that's not the full story. What if you could bring those foods back and actually support better blood sugar at the same time? Today, you'll learn about 5 high-carb foods that can be surprisingly safe when prepared the right way. Here's the important part. Not every carbohydrate behaves the same in your body. When you eat starchy foods, they break down into glucose at different speeds. Imagine building a campfire. Thin twigs catch fire right away but burn out quickly, while thicker logs smolder slowly, giving steady heat over time. Some carbs act like twigs, fast and fiery, while others act like logs, releasing their energy more gradually. This is why some meals leave you with sudden spikes, while others keep you feeling steady. That's where resistant starch comes in. Resistant starch is often called the hidden starch because your digestive system doesn't fully break it down. Instead, it passes through the small intestine, behaving more like fiber. Because of this, the release of glucose happens more slowly, and demand for insulin tends to be lower. Research even links resistant starch to potential improvements in insulin sensitivity over time, making it a topic of growing interest in nutrition science. Studies consistently show that meals with resistant starch lead to gentler blood sugar peaks than the same meals without it. In other words, the real issue isn't carbs themselves, it's how you prepare them. And once you understand that, everything changes. Even foods like bread or pasta, when handled the right way, can actually help stabilize glucose instead of spiking it. So let's start with the most misunderstood of them all. White rice is often singled out as one of the hardest foods to keep under control, since a bowl of freshly cooked rice can raise blood sugar very quickly. When rice is eaten hot and soft, the starch inside breaks down fast, so glucose enters the bloodstream more quickly than the body can keep up with. For many people, this has led to the belief that rice must always be off limits. The reality is more nuanced. You can change how rice affects your blood sugar simply by changing how it's prepared and stored. When rice is cooked and then cooled in the refrigerator for about 24 hours, part of the starch structure reshapes itself into resistant starch. Resistant starch isn't digested in the same way as normal starch, so glucose is released more slowly. Research shows that even if you reheat the rice after storing it, the glycemic response is still lower compared with freshly cooked rice. One detail to note is that this stability seems stronger with rice than with other starchy foods like potatoes, where reheating may cause more of the resistant starch to break down. You can think of resistant starch as a locked box of energy. Instead of flooding your system all at once, much of the glucose remains sealed away until it reaches the large intestine, where gut bacteria gradually use it for fuel. This not only softens the immediate blood sugar rise, but also helps nourish healthy bacteria that play a role in digestion. Several clinical studies have confirmed these effects. People who ate rice that had been cooked, cooled, and reheated showed lower post-meal glucose peaks than when eating the same rice freshly cooked. Interestingly, one study with people taking insulin found another result. While glucose peaks decreased, the number of low blood sugar dips increased when insulin doses stayed the same. If you want to try this at home, cook rice as you normally would, let it cool down to room temperature, then refrigerate it promptly at about 4 degrees Celsius for at least 24 hours in a covered container. Before eating, reheat it thoroughly until steaming hot to ensure it's safe. A splash of vinegar or lemon juice can also slow digestion further. So the trick isn't cutting rice, it's cooling it. But what about bread? That's gotta be off limits, right? Sourdough bread is one of the clearest examples of how preparation changes how your body responds to the same basic ingredients. At first glance, it looks like any other loaf, but what happens during fermentation gives it very different qualities. Regular white bread made with commercial yeast is baked quickly, leaving starches easy to digest and fast to raise blood sugar. In contrast, sourdough develops slowly with a live culture of bacteria and yeast. During this process, the microbes break down part of the flour, create organic acids inside the dough, and increase levels of resistant starch. For people who assume all bread is equally problematic, this difference is important. The acids formed during fermentation slow the breakdown of starch, so glucose is released into the bloodstream at a steadier pace. It's not a perfect solution. Bread still contains carbohydrates, but the shift is enough that many people report feeling less of a spike or a crash when they eat sourdough compared with standard white bread. Clinical studies and reviews support this pattern, showing sourdough often lowers post-meal glucose compared with standard bread. especially when whole grain flour is used. One possible benefit goes beyond glucose control. The structure created by fermentation may also influence insulin response, which could explain why some people feel more sustained energy after eating sourdough. While the data is not conclusive, it suggests that bread doesn't always have to mean a sharp rise in blood sugar. If you decide to add sourdough to your meals, be deliberate in your choice. Not all loaves sold as sourdough go through true fermentation. Some mass-produced breads use commercial yeast and add vinegar or flavoring to mimic the taste without replicating the benefits. To find real sourdough, check that the label mentions a starter, fermentation, and ideally whole grain flour. Authentic loaves usually have a slightly tangy aroma and a denser crumb compared to the airy texture of regular white bread. And just like bread, there's another starchy favorite that gets a bad reputation, but the way you prepare it makes all the difference. Potatoes are often labeled sugar bombs because when they're eaten hot and freshly cooked, they can raise blood sugar quickly. For many people, this has led to avoiding them altogether. But the way you prepare and serve potatoes dramatically changes their impact on your body. The exact same potato can either trigger a steep spike or a much smoother rise, depending on what happens after cooking. When potatoes are eaten hot, the starch molecules are loose and easy to break down, so glucose moves swiftly into the bloodstream. That's why potatoes are usually ranked as a high glycemic food. But when potatoes are cooled in the refrigerator after cooking, something different takes place. Over about 24 hours, some of the starch reorganizes into resistant starch, which is digested more slowly and leads to steadier blood sugar levels. Research has shown that boiled and chilled potatoes often produce a lower glucose response compared with hot, freshly cooked ones. For example, potato salad made from cooled potatoes has been linked with noticeably gentler blood sugar curves. There is one important detail, though. Reheating potatoes after chilling can cause part of that resistant starch to revert back to digestible starch. This effect doesn't happen as strongly with rice. The benefit is therefore most consistent when potatoes are eaten cold, such as in a salad, and potentially smaller when reheated. Adding a little acid or fat can also help. A tablespoon of vinegar-based dressing on a potato salad or a drizzle of olive oil over roasted potatoes can slow digestion further and make the meal both steadier for blood sugar and more satisfying. Pairing potatoes with protein-rich foods at the same meal may also help moderate the overall response. If you prepare potatoes in advance, remember to handle them safely. Refrigerate them within 2 hours of cooking, store them in a covered container at about 4 degrees Celsius, and finish them within a few days to avoid bacterial growth. This step is especially important when serving older adults or preparing food ahead for family members. So that's 3 surprising carbs down. Now let's look at one that gets an even worse reputation but may not deserve it. For many families, pasta is one of the ultimate comfort foods, yet it's often one of the first dishes people think they need to abandon when watching their blood sugar. A plate of spaghetti or penne is closely associated with sharp glucose spikes, which makes pasta night feel more like a gamble than a pleasure. But the truth is, pasta doesn't have to disappear. It just needs some adjustments in how it's prepared and served. Fresh hot pasta made from refined wheat tends to digest quickly. The starch molecules are readily broken down, so glucose rises rapidly in the bloodstream. This explains why people may see high meter readings soon after eating. The challenge is how to keep pasta enjoyable without letting it overwhelm blood sugar control. One method studied is cooking pasta, allowing it to cool, and then reheating it before eating. Cooling changes the arrangement of starch granules, turning part of them into resistant starch, which digests more slowly. Pilot studies suggest reheated pasta produces lower glucose peaks compared with freshly cooked pasta. Results on chilled-only pasta vary depending on the study, but the consistency is stronger when cooled and then reheated. That nuance matters because it shows not every preparation gives the same effect. There's also a growing variety of alternative pastas made from lentils, chickpeas, or other legumes. Research shows these versions tend to offer more protein and fiber, which support steadier blood sugar and help you feel satisfied longer. A practical approach is to try lentil or chickpea pasta in one meal and keep portion size sensible. They often fill you up with less. When it comes to traditional pasta, cooking until al dente provides another benefit. Firmer pasta breaks down more slowly than overcooked pasta, especially when combined with cooling and reheating. One useful approach is to cook pasta al dente, refrigerate it overnight, and the next day reheat it with your favorite sauce alongside a protein like chicken, fish, or beans. This combination not only tempers the glucose rise but also makes for a more balanced meal that keeps you full. So far, we've tackled lunch and dinner favorites, but the carb that kicks off your morning? That's where things really get interesting. Oats are a breakfast staple that can either spike your sugar or help stabilize it, depending on how they're chosen and prepared. Many people lean on instant oats or quick cook packets because they're convenient, but these highly processed versions break down too quickly in the digestive tract. The starch converts into glucose almost immediately, often leading to the very spikes people are trying to avoid. Not all oats behave the same way. Instant oats are rolled thinner, pre-cooked, and designed to soften rapidly, so the body has little work to do. Steel-cut and old-fashioned rolled oats, on the other hand, stay closer to their original grain form. That extra structure takes longer to digest, which helps slow the release of glucose. How you prepare them also matters. The same oat groats can either give you a smooth curve or send your levels higher, depending on the method. The main reason oats can support steadier energy is a soluble fiber called beta-glucan. When it mixes with liquid, it turns into a gel-like texture. This slows the emptying of food from your stomach and delays how fast sugars are released. You can think of beta-glucan as a sponge that slowly squeezes out liquid instead of letting it rush through. That extra time helps blunt post-meal spikes. Overnight soaking can strengthen this effect. In controlled trials, oats soaked overnight in milk or yogurt produced about a 1/4 to 1/3 lower post-meal glucose and insulin response compared with certain instant cereals, a measurable research-backed benefit. For example, overnight oats using steel-cut or rolled oats have been linked with reductions of up to 33% in glucose and insulin spikes. A practical way to try this at home is simple. Combine half a cup of rolled or steel-cut oats with milk, almond milk, or yogurt in a covered container. Let them sit in the refrigerator overnight, then add nuts, seeds, or berries in the morning. The oats soften without cooking, the beta-glucan has time to work, and the added fat and protein from toppings further blunt the glucose response. The result is a breakfast that's filling, steadying, and ready when you wake up. So yes, carbs can stay on your plate if you know how to handle them. But if you're serious about managing diabetes naturally, there's one leaf making headlines for how fast it lowers blood sugar, shrinks belly fat, and protects your arteries. It's powerful, affordable, and backed by science. Tap here to see how it works. This is the one video you don't want to miss.